Chapter 20 Scheming. Breakfast behind him, Dewey stood in his unusual coveralls and boots, and now a green woolen coat, surveying the situation again. His breath steamed the air as he stood on the porch, rubbing at the scruff on his chin. The weather forecaster this morning promised the arrival of cooler weather, blowing below freezing, with a possibility of precipitation. This just might work, he thought. He would have to move several rows of wood from the woodshed onto the porch. It wasn't ideal, but it would do. Grady insisted on neat, even rows, but that didn't matter to Dewey. He would just make a pile on the porch. Okay, he said to himself, let's do this. It was just as Pula figured. Burdock watched as Dewey harnessed the horses, attached the wagon, and started to hurl chunks of split wood into the wagon bed. All the while, the barn animals were in a state of anxiety and excitement. As soon as Dewey was out of the barn, Figgy, of course, went back to digging. Tick dashed out in his pen, ricocheting off the walls. "Dear boy," said Nanny, "you're going to wear yourself out. You need to save your energy for when Dewey returns." But her words had no effect. Tick was as capable of staying still as a buoyant in a stormy sea. Fluff, too, was wound up, still circles around her pen, first clockwise, then counterclockwise, then clockwise again. She was grateful when Figgy pushed her more dirt. It gave her something to do. Noctua was asleep, but resting up on the rafters. She worried it was too late to retrace her route back to the round barn. Should she be around in case she was needed? It wasn't that she was afraid she couldn't find the barn. She knew she could get there. But it was entirely different when she had to navigate a route by considering what obstacles would hinder the barn animals on the ground. She never had to think about crossing the landscape in this restricted way. Miss Brown and Nanny were discussing the creaking door. "Gosh, you're right, Miss Brown," cried Nanny. "If Dewey hears the door open, we're caught." It was amazing to Nanny how many things they had taken into consideration. Escape should not be taken lightly. What other things were they forgetting? "Any idea what we should do about the creek?" she asked. Miss Brown had been thinking about that. She knew that usually a door is oiled with an oilet can, and a few drops of WD-40 squeezed right to the creaky hinges would do the trick. But none of the animals could manage a can's nozzle, even if they knew where to find it. "Let's ask Burdock to look in the tool room," suggested Mrs. Brown. "See if there's anything at all that looks oily. It doesn't have to last. We just need something to quiet the creek this one time. Then let's hope we're gone." Again Burdock was summoned by only this time not from sleep, though most of him was unmoving like a crouching statue. His gray tail flicked slowly back and forth. He had stationed himself in the doorway to await the horses' return and signal the others. He was the self-appointed station. But now he left his post and stood between the velvety brown head of Mrs. Brown and the cinnamon head of Nanny. "What is it?" he asked. The cow and the goat explained, ending with, "Just look for something oily." "Oily," said Burdock, and trotted quickly down the aisle to the tool shed. The tool room was a mess. Burdock snaked between the accumulated mounds of metal and glass, looking at each open jar and pail. Most of the cans were capped off, but a few weren't, and in one of those, not far from the door, the oily smug sat on an opaque, dark paint. Or that's what it looked like. Burdock went down and reported his findings. "Well, that'll do," he asked. "I think so," said Mrs. Brown. What Burdock didn't tell them was that the gasoline jugs that he'd previously seen on the shelves had been moved. Now they stood ready at the edge of the door.